Thank you all for getting to some detail around your rationale, particularly around this point around access, engagement and influence with the current military regime. And just sort of to follow on from Mr Hill's questions, he kind of focused in on the issue around how you convey concerns, but I think you also mentioned the need to actually call for change. So I guess my question is, in your rationale, in your advice to government, how do you explain what are the metrics that you kind of determine to be important in measuring whether the influence itself actually can lead to change? Because again, you're conveying concerns to a military junta and asking them to change. How likely is that? And wouldn't it be, I mean, I'm just speaking sort of off the back of an envelope here, but if you're really looking at real influence and sending a clear message to the junta about change, would be more, I guess as a metric, more influential if you're doing this collectively with the EU, the US and a number of other international partners to send a clear message that the international community does not accept the military coup and the military junta as a legitimate government of Myanmar. I guess that's my first question.
Thanks very much. I think in terms of metrics for influence, I mean, it's very hard to measure how much influence you have, but I think, I suppose if we have any influence, our concern is not to remove it. And I think how likely is it that we will have an impact? Well, it's a similar response in a way. I think Australia has traditionally been regarded as being a little more engaged in the ASEAN region than countries that are further away. And I think we do have a strong basis that we've built up over decades, actually, to try to use the goodwill and the influence that we have built up to try and exert change. I haven't given up on that. I don't want to give up on that.
Ask, what is your end objective? Because influence is one thing, it's not an end in itself. Your objective here would be, it sounds like from what you're saying, is to convey your concerns about the situation, fair enough, and we can debate about how effective that is, and B, to call for change. What change? Change so that the democratically elected representatives of the parliament can form their government? Is that the change that you're seeking to effect? That's one of them,
absolutely. Okay. I mean, I think we already do convey our concerns, and I would say that I think the Myanmar regime is under no illusions as to the concerns of Australia as well as the other countries in the international community. So I think we do that already. But in terms of your question around what change are we trying to effect, absolutely, it's to get back onto the path of democracy. It's to stop killing people, stop the deaths. I think that's a really big priority and something we emphasise very strongly. And it's to release the arbitrarily detained people.
Fair enough. So if that is the case, and that's clear, then, and I know there are difficulties in having metrics around how you measure influence and how you measure the impact, but wouldn't it be clear that in order to effect that change, you have to make an assessment that after would it be 3-4 months, the access and this engagement goal to keep the channel of influence open has not worked. Sean Turnell is still not been released. They are still killing people. The Tatmadaw are not going to back down, no matter if the VCDF calls their number 2 or whatever back channel is used by Australia. They're going to ignore us. Let's just be realistic about it. And has there been any thinking at DFAT or at the government level to say, well, you know what, we need to take the next step here and work with partners, both in the region and ASEAN and others, to send that clear message? So our influence becomes one that is collective rather than maintaining the goal of an internal or a back channel that you keep open. I mean, at what point are you going to realise that the back channel engagement and access is not giving you the influence? When does that metric kick in?
Can I just ask a supplementary question before you answer that? Would ASEAN, particularly the people who've led this engagement on this issue, so particularly the countries Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore, would they welcome Australia imposing additional sanctions on members of the Tatmadaw might? I suspect the answer is no, but I'd like to hear your view on
Good
that.
supplementary. Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
So I think the answer is no. I think in terms of collective influence, I think countries can all work together with some common messages without actually necessarily needing to use exactly the same means of getting there, and still have a very strong impact, and possibly even a stronger impact if we all use our different strengths. I think that can be quite powerful. I think in terms of, when do we recognise that it's not working and change tack is a very tricky question to answer. I think right now, when ASEAN has only just met at leaders level and is just starting to implement, we're at the beginning of what will, I think, be quite a long and complex process. For me, I guess this is my personal assessment, I would say now is not the time, but I'm not in a position to say when will be the time, or when the Minister, of course, will choose to make decisions, that she might choose to make in future. That's obviously her prerogative, and I'm not able to comment on that. I do think, though, that it has, as you say, it's been 100 days, but in a situation this complex, I think the reality is it is going to take quite a lot longer than that. And as I said earlier, I don't want to give up on our ability to have influence through our current approach.
Because you still believe the